Welcome back everyone. So, this is Peter from Martial Arts Tested, and today I'm going to teach you about forms in martial arts, and I'm going to share with you 3 of my secrets about training with forms. So, let's jump right into it. Forms are really important to a lot of traditional martial arts styles, and you might know them from videos you have seen where maybe a huge crowd is performing the same form and everyone has this choreography they are looking like they are doing, and maybe you've also seen them in some warrior monk video where a monk is training with a weapon and is doing a form which has a weapon included and which is looking really fancy, and yeah, so that's where you've seen them most likely, but they are also still used to train martial artists in a lot of practices. So, why are we learning forms? Forms are something that's really important and helpful to train something, to get into your unconscious mind, create some muscle memory for some movements, and just train some movements that you're usually not practicing in exercises. Let's have a look at what kind of forms we're having. So as mentioned, we have different forms for different martial arts, and on those we also have forms with different tools. We might have forms with weapons, as mentioned before. You might also have forms without a weapon. We will have a look at that in a short time. And we will also have forms that include, for example, an object like a dummy. So let's have a look at a form and try to see what they are doing. As you can see in this form, there are different movements packed together into one bigger collection of movements, and this collection then is called a form. Yeah? Those separate movements, as you can see here, look like they are making no sense at all, and that's most likely because they are making no sense if you combine them in the way they are presented in a form. Because why is that? On a form there's a lot of combination of different ideas packed together, and those different ideas all are packed into the same form. So you might be wondering, well, but why aren't we training one form for each idea that makes a little bit more sense? Well, that is because the forms would then be really, really short, and you would have thousands of forms to recognize and remember, and that's why it's a little bit more complicated. So let's have a look at this form right here. So let's take apart all the separate movements. First, we can see there's a punch involved in this form. You can see it's very easy and very short, and it's followed by a hand movement. Yeah? And the hand movement is just a movement of the wrist, and it does not really make any sense to have that as a follow-up as a punch as mentioned. But the wrist movement itself is also important and is a technique for itself and has to be trained, because the wrist movement, for example, is something that is not really trained naturally, so that might most likely will be undertrained. You're also not training that movement anywhere in the gym if you're doing weightlifting or something like that. So in this form there's a lot more movement going on, as you can see, a lot of different ideas, less repetition of the same things, and basically it's just a lot longer and a lot more things are packed into it. So we would not be able to cover all of that in just a small video. So that's something for the future to maybe look a little bit closer into. Lastly, let's have a quick look at a form that is presented with a dummy. You might know that from my other demonstration video already. If you want to learn more about how the dummy is helping us to train, then you can check out my other video over here. So you might be wondering, well, now you showed me all of those forms, but are they really working? And why are we still training them today if they are so old? Martial arts evolved so much, so why is there no change? Well, basically that's not totally correct. Maybe on some martial arts and some lineages there is no change, and they are stubborn, but there are a lot of martial arts which are also going with the development and checking, okay, we have something new, some new ways of fighting, some techniques that someone invented, and we are trying to adapt to it. And then maybe there are some small changes to a form, or a variant is created that can then be trained. So I myself, for example, training forms, I already train forms are slightly different than my brothers who are training here with me, and they are training some forms just slightly different than myself, but only on some movements because they learned them like 1 or 2 years earlier or prior to me, and so I just learned the adapted form, and then they can either also try to adapt the form or they stick to their form, whichever they think is more suited for them to know, okay, this makes sense to change or this does not make sense, because it has to fit your style as well. So don't forget that you also have a style and you have to train so that it fits your fighting style. Let's get to the part that you all waited for, my little secrets about forms. So my first secret, and it's really one of my favorite ones, is if you're doing a form, do not do the movement and to just do the movement. But what do you mean by that, you might ask? Well, it's a good question. I mean, if you're doing the movement, then maybe you did the form just as it looked and it looked perfectly, but you did not really learn anything. So for that, you have to see what's the idea behind the form and visualize the idea while doing the form. So if you're just having the form and you're doing the movement, well, then you did the movement, but there's no clear intent why you did it, and you will never be able to have it ready into your muscle memory or into your unconscious mind. For that, you really have to think about what's the idea behind this small part in the form. So, for example, this one. So only take like 1 or 2 ideas from the form, and then if you're doing the form, try to nail those ideas with the movement at the same time in your head and in your execution, and then you will get something out of doing the form instead of just clowning around and dancing. So my second secret for you on forms is, do not think about forms as only training the form and the technique. Think about them as getting your mind calmed down for a training session and to get into the mood for training and breaking free from your workday and your stressful life. So use the forms to start your training, clean your mind, and also get some energy and try to get calm while you focus on the ideas of the form. And then you not only practice the forms, you're also now in a state of mind that your body and mind are ready to get some exercise. So do them at the beginning of your training and combine the training with the forms. So my third secret for you about forms is how to get good at forms and getting the idea in your mind. Well, the secret is talk to someone else who is also practicing the forms. Well, that sounds easy. Why didn't I think of that? You might think, but that's really the secret. So if you're trying to understand an idea and the idea makes no sense, just go to someone else who's also practicing the form or training it and maybe has some same ideas of the movements in his head. Maybe he has some slight variants, and you can just talk about your ideas, and you will find out talking about them really shows you how you understand the idea and how the movement should be executed if you're trying to explain it on an example and just test it out with someone else. And they are presenting their solution, you're presenting your solution, and you're questioning each other's solutions and looking for why this one might have some errors, and what happens if you're doing something else, and what could be the benefit of the slight variant that he might do different than you, or you are doing different than him. So for myself, I also learned a lot with talking to my training partners about the forms and seeing how they understood the form, why they are hitting here and they are not hitting here. Maybe it's only something that's here, there's a meant for like a control, but maybe I understood that movement as a punch or as a push, and so you have to see, well, if there's no one else there, you have just to talk about what is meant by some of the movements and where the force is going, because you cannot really see the force in the forms, and you really have to talk about it and get it right to really practice it and get it into your mind correctly. So now I shared all of my secrets about forms. Now it's your time to share your secrets in the comments and tell me what did I miss and what is your secret about forms in martial arts, and which is your favorite form in your martial art that you're practicing, or why your martial art does not practice forms and why do you think forms are stupid.